The Italian capital was through the initial turmoil after sudden and violent hailstorm hit the Rome, covering the streets with the ice, damaged vehicles and living residents stranded. The storm, which arrived without warning, was declared a meteorologist is one of the most intense hail in the city has in the decades. Within minutes, the sky darkened over the central Rome before unleashing the barrage of hailstorms, some the size of Gold's Ball. The streets around the Colosseum, Pisa, Venezia and Trastevere was transformed into rivers of ice. Video shared on social media showed scooters and cars are skidding out of control while passengers rolled their shelters in subway station. It sounded like the gunshot of roofs, said resident Chiara Lombardi. Was a car white plate was shattered. In 15 minutes everything was destroyed. Emergency service responded. The hundreds of calls or rescue drivers trapped in the flooded overpasses and removing fallen branches. At least 25 people were injured, mainly is broken glass and debris. Hospitals reported an increase in administration while several schools closed after the roofs suffered structure damage. Rome's already overburdened infrastructure succumbed to onslaught. Metro Line A was temporarily suspended due to flooding, and thousands of homes were left without power. Insurers grabbed estimated the damage could reach tens of millions of euros. Which vehicles safe ground of outdoors suffered been the most affected. Farmers in Lazio also suffered losers of vegetables field and vineyard were hit by the storm. Agriculture Association described the event of the catastrophic blow and the high-risk season. Meteorologists linking the storm and wind of the most air and collided with the cold front conditions intensified by the expectation warm weather of the Mediterranean. This is a classic case of extreme weather amplified by climate change. The Italian capital, more accustomed by scrolling heat wave, stumbled after exploding hailstorm hit Rome, covering the streets with ice, destroying cars and causing chaos throughout the entire city. What began the heavy rain suddenly intensified into the torrent and hailstorm, larger than the golf ball battering the city at nearly half an hour. When it means major landmarks such as the Colosseum and Spanish Steps and Villa de Corsa was surrounded by the river of ice while traffic came to complete standstill. It was a winter had arrived violent incident, said Luca Romano, who abandoned her car near the pits of Venezia. The hailstorm broken glass it through the roof when going to collapse. Emergency hotline were overwhelmed and firefighters rushed to more than 500 incidents across the capital. Foreign streets crushed vehicles, safe ground windows shattered and several subway stations were flooded. At least 40 people were treated to injuries mainly caused by broken glass and slippery falls. Hospitals in Trastevere and Termini reported overcrowded emergency rooms.
Assassini! Delinquenti sono! Delinquenti sono! Sono dei delinquenti! A muoversi in questo tempo! Delinquenti!
Public transportation was paralyzed, with parts of the subway lines A and B suspended, bases rerouted and the flights in Campino Airport delayed after runway were covered in hail. More than 13,000 residents were left without power, living entire neighborhoods in the dark. The economic impact is already severe. Outdoor territories across Rome historic center were destroyed and initial estimates suggest that the damage could expect 15 million. Farmers in Lazio described the storm and destination. An entire vineyard vine and olive groves destroyed it in a matter of minutes. Experts blame a collision between humid Mediterranean air and an intense cold front. Meteorologist Elena Rossi noted Rome is experiencing storm weather previously unthinkable. Climate change is increasing both their frequency and intensity. Resident and shaken by their silence, cafe owner Marco DeSantis weapon broken glass had the balcony said. The city was survived the Melina, but every year nature is harder. It is a weekend we cannot ignore. Rome was left stranded after extraordinary hailstorm turned in the Athol city into the local described the sudden winter in September. Streets across the capital, including Ura near the Colosseum and Pisa Venezia, were blanketed a thick layer of ice, disrupting traffic and caused widespread astonishment. The violent storm struck with a little warning, planted the city with a hailstorm the size of a walnut. Within minutes, the rain were overwhelmed, leading the flash flood in low-lying districts. Motorists were forced to abandon cars and ice storms swept through the several avalanches, while public buses struggled to navigate blocked roads. Emergency service reported dozens of calls to assistance. Firefighters were deployed to clear fallen branches and rescue drivers trapped flooded in underpasses. No fatalities were confirmed, but several minor injuries occurred as people slipped on the ice-coated pavement. One resident told local media, "I lived in Rome 40 years. I never seen hell like this. I felt like the city had been dropped into another season." Meteorologists explained that the year was triggered by a clash of warm Mediterranean air with a powerful cold front from the northern Europe, creating ideal conditions for the hail formations. Tourists were equally astonished. Video circulated widely on social media showing iconic landmarks surrounded by palms and hail sparking combination of northern European winter. Although the warning of potential group damage in nearly laser farmland, particularly vineyards and olive groves. Experts note that while hailstorms are not unusual in the central Italy, an intensity of the scale and episode underline a growing volatile weather patterns linking to climate change. A cleanup operations continue. Residents are left reflecting on yet another reminder of nature forcing the city form of the history but increasingly tested by modern climate extremes.
Madre de Dios. Su, que desastre. Mira. Ahora mismo andará, chicos. Holy sh**.
The Italian city of Palermo was left in shock after the severe storm swept through the Sicilian capital, bringing torrential rain, hurricane force winds and flash floods that paralyzed the city. Within hours, streets turned into raging rivers, swept away across the trapped residents in their homes. Emergency services were inundated with a call, rescued dozens of people from flooded cars in the basement. It was like a waterfall rushing throughout the streets, said a local shopkeeper. Describe it now if the store was destroyed in minutes. Hospitals reported an influx of potent safety from the injured and hypothermia, although it confirmed several casualties and thousands of people were left without power as the power lines collapsed under the weight of fallen trees. The city historic districts, usually bustling with the tourists, were usually empty as residents hid in their homes. The storm also disrupted vital infrastructure. Palermo Airport temporarily suspended flights and ferry service were halted due to wave crashed onto the coast. In rural area around the city, farmland was destroyed, onto olive groves and vineyards were flooded, raising fears of significant losses to agriculture. Meteorologists said the storm was intensified by the warm water of the Mediterranean Sea, which follow unstable air masses. Conditions likely to the border effects of the climate change. Italy's civil Protection Agency warned that extreme weather conditions are becoming the new normal, and they call it to mandate investment to flood protection and the early warning system. Local authority declared a state of emergency, and the government promising to allocate funds to deal with the aftermath of the national disaster. Volunteers joined to brigade the police to clear blocked roads, but recovery expected to take weeks to even months.
I'd say so, Bob. This is a big storm.
Sicily was hit a severe storm that swept across the island overnight, causing torrential rain, storms, winds, and widespread flooding. Palermo, Catania, and several smaller towns were worst affected, with the streets thrown into raging rivers, and entire neighborhoods were left without power. Residents reported panic as the water flooded historic city center. It was terrible. In a matter of minutes, the water rose above the car's doors. We had to abandon the vehicles, said Salvatore Russo, the driver from Palermo. Emergency service carried out dozens of rescue operations, including rescuers, families trapped in their homes, and motorists stuck in the underpasses. Authority temporarily closed schools and government offices in several municipalities as prediction. The Sicily Civil Protection Agency declared a highest level of water alert. At least one hospital of Catania reported flooding in the lower floors, forcing staff and relocate pedant. The storm also dealt a serious blow to agriculture, damaging olive groves, citrus, orange, and vineyards were left to blackboard the island economy. Farmers estimated to damage of millions of euros, further complicating the situation in a region that already struggled with the drought to binging of a year. Flights to and from Palermo to Catania airports were delayed and cancelled, and ferry service between Sicily and mainland Italy was suspended to several hours due to rush seas. Meteorologists are linking this storm to a powerful Mediterranean cyclone, sometimes called the Medicon, from the form to the warm seawater full intense weather system. Experts warn that the climate change is making such events more frequent and destructive. The president of the Sicily region promised rapid assistance to the affected communities, stretching the urgent need to strategically flood protection. This storm has once again demonstrated the vulnerability our island in us. We must do decisively to protect life and livelihood, he said. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni expressed her condolences and promised immediate government support. We will not leave Sicily alone with this tragedy. The flood also caused significant economic damage. Vineyards, citrus grove, and olive farms are blackboard on Sicily economy, where flooded and agriculture groups warn of millions in losers. Businesses in the historic center of Palermo may be closed for the weeks and a half a month. The Italian Meteorological Service has linked in disaster to the Medicon and Mediterranean cyclone similar to the Triton storm. Since when the climate change is exacerbating such phenomena as a warning sea contributing to heavier rains and a violent storm. Residents clearing debris are in shock. Standing outside the damaged barrier, Rosa Conte said, Sicily is used to the hardship, but this something else. We cannot fight this our own. Local authority urged residents to stay at home and avoid travel to roads and rail, more driving conditions dangerous. Emergency services were also called to help with the deal in the aftermath of the storm, including clearing roads and SFDs affected. The hail comes as Italy, like much of Europe, experienced unseasonably cold weather. Forecasts predict that the extreme weather could continue for several days with some storms of heavy rain expected across the country. Although Rome is no stranger to extreme weather events, the sudden intensity and hailstorm cut off guard as residents begin the process to cleaning up and repairing the damage caused by the storm. They will adaptedly by keeping a close eye on weather forecast in the coming days. The storm, which has intensified in terrain and sea over the past few hours, has taken a character as a full-fledged cyclone. Winds around the ridge and sometimes exceeded gusts of 100 km/h at the sea was through. In the coming days, severe storm will wake up to 5 to 6 meters high and peaks up to 8 meters are expected in the low Tyrrhenian Sea between the southwestern provinces of Campania, especially Cilento and Calabria, as well over most of Sicily and the Ionian Sea and the entire Adriatic. Tomorrow they shift the low-pressure system towards the Adriatic with a mainly effect to eastern basins. So let's take a look at the details. In dramatic turn of events, Sicily finds itself if those in unprecedented storm its nature unleashed any fury upon the picturesque Italian island. We burst of the exclusive coverage of meteorological spectacle deletion the impact of communities, infrastructure and the environment. As the storm approached Sicily, among the clouds gathering hilding the tempest to apparent apparitions. Coastal area forced to onslaught the fierce winds and torrential rains, leading the widespread flooding in challenging conditions to both residents to emergency service. Our on the ground reported paint a vivid picture to havoc wreaked by the storm. The city of Palermo was transformed into rivers and water levels served submerged cars and tested to resilience to fluidness. The historic architecture withstood the test time to the faces of relentless onslaught, the wind of rain. Throughout the island communities are grappling with the power outage and the storm force caused significant damage to electrical infrastructure. Emergency shelters have been opened to provide refuge to those displaced by the storm. A severe storm hit Sicily, Italy, caused heavy rain, strong winds and widespread flooding in several cities including Palermo and Catania. The extreme weather events which struck without warning turned streets into rivers, disrupted transportation and left thousands of residents without electricity and with damaged property. Local authority issued several weather warnings on the island who received rainfall significantly above the seasonal average. Videos show a dramatic scene where, posted on social media, cars submerged into water, people waist deep water in the floodwaters, and the emergency service trying to reach stranded cities. Meteorologists report that the storm deployed rapidly over the Mediterranean Sea under the influence of low-pressure system combined into high sea surface temperature, and a phenomenon that is becoming increasingly common due to climate change. This is not the first time Sicily was faced at the wrath of nature, but experts are calling this storm one of the most destructive weather events in decades. The last such disaster occurred in 2029, where deadly floods and landslides killed 37 people in Messina, but this time the combination of heavy rainfall, wind and widespread infrastructure damage made the consequences even more serious. According to preliminary government report, more than 1,200 homes were damaged, 14 roads remain closed and 7 bridges have been structure damage. Insurance companies are already inundated with the calls of many families without insurance to continue on compensation from the state. This storm was particularly dangerous because it suddens. Meteorologists issue a yellow alert just hours before the first downpour. By that time, it was too late many communities to prepare. Critics are now to call into fast weather warning system to better preparedness of natural disaster, especially in the southern region, which is often overlooked. Satellite images show in a green picture. The human toll of storm is still being aced. At least 3 deaths have been confirmed so far, including the elderly man who drowned in flooding basement in Messina and young delivery driver who was swept away by floodwaters in Catania. Dozens of people have been injured, many of them due to falling debris and traffic incidents on the road, middle-side pillar or rain. Sicilian Governor Renata Citrelli visited the flooded areas on Tuesday, calling that the damaged helicopters and promised long-term support. We will not abandon our people. The recovery will be swift and complete, we promised during the press conference. Local volunteers arrived the affected areas, diverted flood and helping to clear debris. Social media is now filled not only image and destructive but also of solidarity. Neighbors stretch open shoulders and young groups organized donated drivers. School in several provinces remain closed to damage assessment continue. Psychologists have been sent to provide assistance to children and families affected by trauma, especially in the hardest hit community of Gela and Lixita. At the head of the Mediterranean, the Italian island of Sicily has long been synonymous with the sun of the tempting coastline and seductive blend of the history and culture. However, this idyllic landscape is recently has been transformed into a dramatic scene of nature fury. A formidable storm marked by resilient rain and fierce winds and lashed Sicily, unveiling the vulnerable of even the most picturesque square of the region with the forms of weather. The storm onslaught was achieved with the meteorologists barely able to predict and intensify before the unleashed food and made the apeon of fury. Within hours, streets and town across the Sicily were inundated, transformed urban center into unwelcoming, water-loaded mazes. The rain, increasing unforgiving, pointed the rain portrait of the region undesigned by the elements. In Palermo, the Sicilian capital, scenes and the chaos unfolded. I sense streets and usually burst with the life and aroma of Sicily, crash while deserted save from ascensional vehicles struggling against the rising water. The iconic Tracemassima attachment of Sicily agriculture dangerous stood with the silence within to unflooding calamity. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni expressed her condolences and promised immediate government support. We will not leave Sicily alone with this tragedy. The flood also caused significant economic damage. Vineyards, citrus grove, and olive farms are blackboard on Sicily economy. Where flooded and agriculture groups warn of millions in losers. Businesses in the historic center of Palermo may be closed for the weeks and a half a month. The Italian Meteorological Service has linked in disaster to the Medican and Mediterranean cyclones similar similar to the tropical storm, since one the climate change is exacerbating such phenomena as a warning sea contributing to heavier rains and a violent storm. Residents clearing debris are in shock. Standing outside the damaged barrier, Rosa County said, Sicily is used to the hardship, but this something else. We cannot fight this our own. Rome was hit by a sudden and violent hailstorm, which turned in the historic streets and Italian capital into the city rivers and caused significant disruption to normal life in the city. The storm, which hit late in the evening, blanketed the city with a hailstorm the size of walnuts, breaking windows, damaged cars, and injured dozens of residents and tourists. Within minutes, cobbled streets and famous squares were covered with a white blanket, created stains, more reminiscence of winter and autumn. Severe quickly overlapped caused flash flood that swept through the central area, including Trieste and Prati. Cars were stuck in ice-city water and abysses, and trams stopped while emergency service dealt with debris. Rome Florence Airport reported delays after runway were temporarily covered in hail and lighting forces ground staff and suspended operations. Train service ended from Termini station was also severely disrupted, leaving hundreds of passengers stranded overnight. Hospitals treated dozens of people and injured from the fallen branches slapping on the sky streets and broken glass. It was terrible, said Lucia Bianchi, a local resident. The hailstones were so long and sounding like bullets hitting the window. Video posted online showed streams of hail falling down the Spanish states and a fountain overflowing throughout the city. The storms also left a mark on agriculture, vineyard and olive groves around the Lazio, suffered significant damage, with the farmers reported crops looser just weeks before harvest. For us, it is a disaster, said Marco Rossi, a farmer near Frascati. Months of work were destroyed in half an hour. Meteorologists said the storm was caused a collision between most Mediterranean air and a cold front moving south, conditions increasingly associated with a climate instability. Experts warning that the Rome, like many southern Europe cities, is becoming increasingly vulnerable to sudden extreme weather events. The Italian island of Ischia near Naples have been devastated by powerful flood and landslides triggered by relentless rainfall. Torrents of water swept through the town, tearing apart flood, burying homes smoothed and leaving residents in shock at the state of destruction. In the town of Casamicciola Terme, one of the hardest hit era, houses were engulfed by the cascading mud and debris. It was like avalanches of water and the earth cascading down, said Rosa Espana, a resident who narrowly escaped with her family. In seconds, everything were only goes down. Authorities confirmed multiple deaths, with the several people still missing as such, and the rescue operations continue. Dozens of residents were injured, while hundreds and evacuation from the unstable buildings. Schools, shops, and businesses remain closed as emergency crews clear blocked streets. Emergency snow cars overturned and a half buried, with the rescue workers and volunteers did through their layers of mud with their hands to reach service. Power outage and damaged water supplies have left many communities isolated. The island's still terrain combined with the days of heavy rain triggered a series of landslides that shut down mountains into the coastal town. Experts noted that devastation and uncontrolled construction have worsened island's vulnerability to such disaster. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni experienced condolences to victim families and pledged immediate aid, calling the disaster a national tragedy. Italian Civil Protection Agency has deployed helicopters, driving However, a special units to assist rescue efforts with the local authority declared a state of emergency. The flood has also remained wider concern. Each popular tourist destination known for the hot spring and bridge is now facing questions about building safety and climate resilience. Public transportation was severely disrupted, leaving passengers stranded. The coastal area faced to boost with a storm and strong wave crashing against the coastline caused erosions to damage the city finish. Emergency services are working around the clock to help those in need. The Italian Red Cross has mobilized teams to support the most affected areas, offering shelters and distributing basic necessities. Refuse operations are ongoing, with the reports of people trapped in their homes due to rising water. Helicopters have been deployed to evacuate those to imminent danger. The impact of the storm on agriculture is also a growing concern. Sicily knows the serious growth of vineyard forces potential devastation. Initial estimates suggest significant crops losers, with a could have the long-term economic impact of the region farming communities. Italian Prime Minister Conte has experienced solidarity with the affected residents, pledging government aid to resources to support recovery efforts. He praised the resilience of the Sicilian people and terrorist forced rescues. Meteorologists predict severe weather conditions will continue over the next 24 hours in vast regions to remain vigilant. As Sicily struggles with the aftermath and the disaster of focus to ensure the safety of the residents is beginning to arduous task to rebuilding. The full extent of the damage will become clear in the coming days, but for now Sicily is widespread the storm relentless onslaught. Civil Protection Authority have urged people to affected areas to remain cautious to official warning as more rain forecast in the coming days. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni visited in the affected areas, expressing her solidarity with the victims and pledging government support to reconfusion efforts. This is national emergency, and we are working closely to local authority to ensure the safety for all residents, she said. Climate experts that such extreme weather events could become more frequent due to climate change. Italy, with a varied geography, particularly vulnerable to affected changing weather patterns. The combination of heavy rainfall, poor mountain infrastructure, and urban expansion into flood-prone areas has exacerbated the impact of recent storms. In Venice, a city all too familiar, and the high water level flood definitions were put on the test. The iconic moss barriers designed to protect the crisis from the rising test were activated, sheltering the Venice from significant damage. However, other areas of the region were not so fortunate. Many towns and villages in the Veneto region saw extensive flooding, with the residents forced to higher ground. The Italian government has declared a state of emergency in several regions, mobilizing rescue workers to deploy to area to assist in evacuation efforts. Italy is facing a major crisis after catastrophic floods swept through the parts of the country, with Sicily and Tuscany bearing the brunt of devastation. Torrential rain over the past week was causing rivers to overflow, triggering landslides, and left entire communities underwater. The flood, described as some of the worst in recent memory, have claimed lives, displaced thousands, and caused widespread damage to infrastructure and homes. In Sicily, the latest rainstorm had left widespread flooding across the urban and rural area alike. In the island capital Palermo, streets have turned into rivers, with the cars submerged and many residents forced to evacuate. Catania, another major city, has also been severely affected, with widespread damage reported in a historic center. The floods have overwhelmed the drainage system, leaving emergency services struggling to keep with the demand to rescue operations. Many people have been trapped in their homes, and helicopters have been destroyed to relieve residents from isolated areas. Rome was hit by unexpected and several hailstorms that covered historic capital with a layer of ice, creating several scenes to resemble weather rather than early autumn. The sudden storm swept through the city on Tuesday afternoon, disrupted traffic, flooding subway station and forcing prediction to seek shelter. Local authorities reported that hailstorms, some the size of a golf ball, fell in nearly 20 minutes, covering squares, roads and even areas around the Coliseum. Emergency crew were disrupted to clear broken drains after torrential rain mixing with the ice caused flash flooding in several low-lying areas. Public transport was severely affected, with the several metro lines temporarily suspended due to water ingress. Drivers described terrified moments where the visibility dropped to almost zero. It was like a sky was falling, and the hail bending to so loudly, and the roof in the car was where could hit each other, said the city resident Marco Rossi. Businesses in the city center rushed to protect their shop windows, while cafes and restaurants along the Via del Corso lost their outdoor sitting areas, which were destroyed with the hail. Social media quickly filled with the images of Rome covered trees turned into rivers and ice, caused astonishment around the world. Meteorologists explained that the storm was caused by the sudden collision to warm Mediterranean air with a cold front and swept through the central Italy, an increasingly common pattern associated with the climate instability. Experts warned that such intense hailstorms are becoming more frequent in southern Europe. Despite the chaos, no serious injuries were reported, although dozens of people were treated in hospital to minor cars and businesses. The mayor of Rome urged residents to remain cautious, emphasizing the city's vulnerability to extreme weather events. For many Romans, the storm was stark reminder for the power of nature and the need to better preparedness in the era-changing climate realities.
Eh sì.
As Sicily slowly begins to dry up, the real lesson of the storm is being recovered not only in losers but also in dialogue and the growing average in the Mediterranean Sea. One of the candle as calm sea is sunny skies is becoming of the epicenter of the climate disaster. Experts call this a turning point to the urge Southern European government is invest in the climate resilience. Coastal cities such as Palermo and Catania, densely populated, are reaching a culture heritage, particularly vulnerable to rising sea levels, increasing rainfall to heat waves. The Mediterranean Sea is warming 20% faster than the global average, said Dr. Elena Morandi, the climate researcher of University of Rome. This storm was not a fluke. This is part of the trend we are seeing more intense, more frequent, more destructive. International observers from UNESCO have experienced concerns about Sicily's historical monuments, many of which were flooded or damaged during this storm. The Brockway tributaries of Noto and ancient Greek ruins are still nude, and new part of the parts surrounding Mount Etna were affected. Residents found themselves stranded in their homes waiting for rescue teams to arrive. The heat of Italy, Rome and entire city forced in all shared challenges at the Coliseum, an enduring symbol of Rome history, stood the silent weather the raging storm as a rain and wind threatening to erode an incident forget. Trees turned into rivers and historic positions become waterlogged that caused extensive damage of city infrastructure. Italian authorities renovated their effective response to time of crisis point of action. Emergency service working tirelessly to rescue those trapped in the rising floodwaters and restore essential service helicopters. However, over submerged areas, airlifting residents to safety, the firefighters braved elements to reach those in need. In a shocking turn of events, Italy was thrown into chaos as a Versa storm wreaked havoc across the picture-square landscape of Sicily and Rome. The unrelated tempest, reminiscent of a scene of Dante's Inferno, left a trail of destruction in its wake, testing the resilience of these Italian people and their determination of republic their beloved cities. Sicily, now in the straddling Mediterranean coastal line and historic Kerm, is almost hardest hit by violent tempest. The island, unusually a sure weather, were charged in the turbulent sea of fury, pouring the curse and related force. Torrential rain, accompanied by gale force wind, battered the region, caused widespread flooding, triggering landscape and uprooted centuries-old trees.